Hey, how's it going? We are officially live and in person together, and we are in Connecticut working today with a leadership team, and we just wanted to spend a little time chatting about a couple different topics.
Yes, one of the things that's interesting about the work is how it keeps unfolding. That when you bring it out to schools, there are new uses, new ways of seeing the possibilities for storyboards. We are amazed at the insights our colleagues and fellow educators around the country in different parts of the world are making use of it.
So one of the exciting parts of the collaboration that Heidi and I continue to have as we're celebrating the official 1-year anniversary of Streamlining, the first thing is really seeing how it's impacting people, not just within the United States, but across the globe. So from Wales to a chapters series of workshops that you're doing that's attended by people globally. I've gone to Inventure Academy in Bangalore, India, going to ASA to do a conference on storyboards as well. So the opportunity to start to see the freshness as
Yes.
well as the sort of initial steps that people take so that it feels more self-directed and engaging.
Yeah, I think internationally it is interesting. There's a group of schools I work with a foundation based in Hong Kong, and they work with both host country schools, Chinese schools, as well as international schools around China itself. And what was interesting is the work that I was invited to do wasn't about storyboarding. It was about curriculum design and better communication. But one of the people there had read our book and started to say, you know, do you think maybe storyboarding might help some of our schools
Right.
in communicating the programs? And here was an interesting point, to multiple languages. In other words, we have many different languages represented in our schools, and we're starting to think about the possibilities of how the visual is consistent. It would help for better communication. And I went, oh my gosh,
Yeah.
I would never have thought of that. I think that's just so fascinating.
So I think that's one new development, is starting to see how when a school or an organization starts to get energized about storyboards, how they're personalizing it as well.
Yes.
And I'm thinking about the conversation that you had with the gentleman from Dubai.
Yes, yeah. He has, that was really interesting because his organization is not a school-based organization. It's an organization that attempts to inspire really interesting innovations in a range of institutions. And the storyboard concept is helping him convey that much more clearly,
Right.
but also giving people options on the journey they want to take, whether they were a school or a startup business. And so it's not only it was international, it was out of the education realm.
That's
per
right.
se. So
Yeah.
it was fascinating.
I think the other interesting part is that people are using it and making their own. So the core components that Heidi and I sort of described in the book still ring true. I mean, I think the interesting part is that sometimes when you put something out there, there are times where you start to see, it may need to evolve even before the book comes out. But we still believe pretty strongly that the core components of a unit title that is clear and compelling, an image and a focus of a story actually are the binding agents to communicate directly to students and their families and staff.
Yeah, I think the other piece is it's not only the identification of the components, but it's the through line.
Yes.
That it's not just putting a focus of the story, it's how they're connected, that the narrative thread needs to be explicit. And so yes, we stand by that. In some ways, Allison, it occurs to me it's kind of like the classic notion when you teach literature, that a writer always has the elements of character, plot, and setting. And look at all the variation. For us, I think those core components are like that. They're really solid.
And one of the things that we're thinking about right now as we're working with a range of schools from around the world and at different levels of organizations from around the world, of the importance of identifying the aligned expectations or goals from an external frame of reference, whether it's state standards, national standards, international standards, or you're starting to think about a local set of goals that is connected to vision or a portrait of a graduate or a portrait of a learner. And so I think the dynamic, as we're continuing to do some substantive work in our consulting world lives, the opportunity to think through the importance of learning targets, the significance that they are directly connected or correlated to those external expectations. But we truly believe that identifying those learning targets that are representing those larger goals or expectations are essential to ensure alignment. It's essential to ensure the bundling and placing of expectations appropriately. And it's also essential to start to think about the next phase of the work that you and myself and Benna continue to have conversations around the learning itinerary or the learning journey.
Yeah, I think bottom line, for those of you who are engaged with storyboarding, I hope and I sense that you get this is really about making curriculum and what students experience in school clear.
Yep.
It's an invitation, it's a partnership. So when we talk about standards, which are taxonomies, they're bureaucratic by nature and in a good way. We have organizations that are giving you lists. They're not student friendly. They're not written for students. They're actually not even that teacher friendly in a way. They're just well organized. But what we want to do in doing the learning targets, and that was always the impetus for that work, is to make it student friendly. So again, what happens with learning targets is in the spirit of what storyboarding is about. It's saying, okay, yes, you are compelled as a teacher to work on standards as you should, but when we do it, let's convert them into simple I can statements so the student's involved. And as Rick Stiggins used to always say, if a student doesn't know what the target is, they can't hit it. So I think it still is that idea of making it student-centered and available to them.
And I think the last part that we just wanted to chat about is give you a preview of the kinds of things that we're working on now. I think one of the important parts is the crafting and the pride people take and the joy they take in developing the curriculum storyboard as a preview or an advanced organizer, not just for the teacher, but also for students to continue to give them insight into where they're heading, what kind of curiosities and creations they can be part of. But I think at the same time, we also want to start moving into this new territory of, so how do you make it real in your classroom level? How do you make it come alive? And I think one thing that we've been talking about, making it come alive, is to actually have it be living in the classroom so that the curriculum storyboards are a journey that students and the teacher are actively making sense of. But I think the other part that we're starting to play with now as a quick sneak peek is that we're thinking about the idea of a learning itinerary or a learning journey.
Yes, I think let's just talk turkey for a minute. What we're talking about are lesson plans, but let's move past them, the next iteration of those. And rather than it be teacher notation, what you need to do, all that you can still do. Nobody's going to take that away from you. And if you want to have your plans laid out, generally they are quite idiosyncratic and teachers do the way they want. But in the same spirit of how the storyboard makes the bigger picture of the year layout, what about day to day? How could we convey very simply? Streamlining is always on the back of our mind, sort of like through that lens, very simply, clearly, what I'm going to be doing and how it helps me on this journey across the year.
That's right.
And we're working through some ideas, and simplicity is key, maybe even some engaging kinds of icons that reflect the decisions you make. Practical, practical, but accessible.
Yeah.
And so that's some of the ideas we're toying with right now and sketching out and having some fun with, and would love your input and ideas and thoughts about that.
That's right.
What would be helpful? That'd be good.
So stay tuned. So there'll be a series of blog posts and further conversations on that. But in the meantime, if you have an idea or you want to share some practices of what are the fundamental components that are really helpful to you as a classroom teacher that helps clearly simplify, not just from your planning perspective, but what you're engaging with the students. What might be some thinking routines or practices that you really swear by as fundamental to engage in thoughtful connections, not again just teacher to student, but growing the capacity of students to make sense of thinking and challenges with one another. So looking forward to connecting with you further, and thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.